Welcome to another episode of the BrainFood Show. In this one, we're continuing our theme from last episode. I believe this will be titled Amazing Animal Facts Part 2. And as I said last time, these are not your regular amazing animal facts that you'll see on some list online where, you know, there's something and you already know it and it's boring.
Yeah, that would be boring.
If you missed last week's it would, and they always suck.
Well, and like I wouldn't want to research those, like, because that's just boring. It's like why
It's
even
super
researching
boring.
it's like that's awful. I want to research things that are actually cool and interesting.
Which is why we stand out from the crowd.
Yes.
But also, yeah, those things you've seen them all before. They're boring. Last week's episode or yesterday's episode, I don't know when these things are released, but whatever. I thought when I was like, animal facts, are these going to be good? I don't know why I doubted you, man, because then I look at the notes and they're all stupidly good.
Yeah.
So there's that. I still sound funny. If people are wondering why I sound funny, it's because we recorded this episode about 10 minutes after we recorded the last episode. I still haven't got used to my new, I'm having dental work done and I've got this thing in my mouth. So I still haven't got used to it yet. It hasn't been a week. It has been 10 minutes. So that's why.
Do you have like that in, you know, people like, so like famous people will get insurance on random stuff like their face or something. And because you make your living talking, right? So like, do you have insurance for your voice? Like, so if like your voice...
Why did you think of that right now?
If your voice just goes out, do you get insurance? And so you got insurance where you're just good or whatever?
This week I have been sorting that out.
Really?
That's crazy. Yeah, that's bizarre.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to do. And I suppose it is a major first world problem when you Google something and you just get news results, you know, these kind of Beyonce insured her legs for $10 million or whatever, because you're looking up, how do I insure my image or my voice? Because if I'm in a horrible car accident and my face gets all ruined or my voice gets ruined, I won't be able to do this. And the problem is I'll definitely be able to do some other job, you know,
but you have a
from
transition
when
period.
no one can see me.
Yeah.
And not just the transition period, but I'm fairly sure, you know, I could do something that would be a highly skilled thing.
Yeah.
But it's not going to pay very well for a long time.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give up, you know, what a business is provides quite a nice lifestyle these days. And I want to be good at, you know, something close to that level rather than, or even if you're in a car accident or something and you get your brain gets a bit funny and you can't really concentrate on stuff anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have been looking into insurance against that.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Follow up later.
I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, I want to know how that goes.
It's actually very, like I said, it's been quite hard to find. A friend of mine, he knew a model who I think actually did insure her legs. That's probably where I got this thing from, or she insured something, and he got something about Lloyd's of London, which is a major insurer. This was really hard to figure out, and I couldn't really... You know, it's just you want to get someone on the phone who knows about this stuff and just tell me what to do so I can write you a check. Yeah. It's been surprisingly hard to find that person.
Well,
if anyone's listening, happens to be an insurance agent.
Yeah. And it'd be interesting to see like how much will that cost? Like, you know, like something like that. There's a custom plan like that. That's, you know.
My experience with insurance is it's always been surprisingly cheap.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, maybe I'll be horribly surprised. Because it's always quite a low risk of these things happening.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Yeah. And I don't smoke. I don't even drive. I mean, very rarely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll keep you posted. Yeah. Tell me, should we crack on? Let's do some quick facts.
Yeah. So,
well, this is all kind of quick facts, but let's do our introductory quick fact.
So the Colossal Squid, probably the most famous of all squids. The
most colossal, for sure.
The largest known squid in terms of mass on the Earth. And it turns out they have a donut-shaped brain. And with their esophagus...
I've seen pictures of this.
Yeah, with their esophagus actually runs through the hole in the center of their brain. And you could think this is not ideal, because what if they eat something really big and they swallow it and then it just like expands their esophagus and then damages their brain? That doesn't seem like a good design or evolutionary trait, but this because it's small. Like the esophagus's diameter is only 10 millimeters or about 0.39 inches. So less than half an inch or about, you know, or a centimeter. So
I was thinking about this, right?
Yeah.
And it does seem like that is a whoever designed that's an idiot.
Yeah. That engineer is fired.
Oh no, we're going to get some hate for that one. It's like, God designed that and he's not an idiot. I was thinking about this, right? What about us? We're pretty badly designed.
Yeah.
If you looked objectively at a human, I was like, wait, your food and your air goes down the same pipe?
That's true.
What's up with that?
Yeah, it would be nice, like whales, how they have the separate track. But
yeah, it's like, what if something gets stuck in there? Oh, it does quite often and we die.
Yeah, that's a thing that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's true. And presumably this isn't much of a problem for the colossal squid, as we'll get into momentarily. But yeah, it does, as you might imagine, it does have the side effect that they do have to tear up their food into very tiny little bits before they swallow it, so that it doesn't damage their tiny little brains. And they do have very tiny little brains. They're only about 100 grams is what their brains are, or 0.22 pounds. So they're tiny. So
I like that you put the metric first there.
Yeah.
It's progress.
So, but the colossal squid is huge. So how do they do this? So they're about 39 to 46 feet long, or 11.8 to 14 meters is the conversion there. Or
where they're just constantly chewing.
Yeah, and the 1,000 to 1,500 pounds, or 453 to 690 kilograms. So it turns out, though, despite their massive size, they don't actually need to eat very much at all, because of where they live. It's extremely cold. It's about 1.5 miles down, or 2.2 kilometers down. It's super cold, and down there, sort of the southern tip of Africa and throughout the Antarctic. So they have actually very slow metabolisms, and so they can comfortably live, turns out, on about 30 grams of food per day, or about 0.07 pounds is all they need. Now, presumably they could eat more if they have it available and maybe grow bigger or whatever, but they don't need to.
Even bigger.
Yeah, they don't need to. It turns out
the double colossal squid.
Yeah, so they it's thought from this, when this was all discovered.
The colossalist.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's thought that they must not, because they're slow metabolism and everything, they probably just mostly sit around and wait for stuff to come to them, because they also don't need much food. And so probably just when something swims by, they just sort of reach out, grab it, and they have sharp hooks and stuff. So they grab with their tentacles the thing, bring it towards their little powerful beak, and then just sort of tear off little bits at a time. And this is not going to be a pleasant death. So they're taking these tiny little nips, just little bits of flesh here and there, because one of their favorite things to eat is called the Patagonian toothfish, which can be 2.3 meters or 7 feet long. So this is a fairly large thing, which can can sustain the colossal squid for about 2/3 of a year, if you do the math on that, if they needed to. Now, presumably they can just eat more or whatever, but they can live off that for quite some time. And so you're the Patagonian toothfish, just sitting there. It's got you. You're not getting away. And they're just like, here, I'll just take a little bite, like a little nibble, and just keep nibbling. It's going to take a while for that thing to die. And just, as the colossal squid's eating them. So not a pleasant death. But another interesting thing about the colossal squid, before we move on to the main content. And so they have these little statoliths. There's basically just these little tiny bone-like objects, things in their brain. And there's this small chamber in their brain where these things are. And so what does this thing do? Quite fascinating. It is how they tell which way is up and which way is down in the ocean, depending on the orientation of these bone-like objects in their little brain.
Oh, well, because they'll float or something in there.
Yeah, presumably, or just gravity works. So, and just that's a little sensor that's built into their brain, basically to tell them which way is up and which way is down, because it's just completely pitch black, where they live.
If I'm in underwater and I'm upside down, do I know that?
Not necessarily, no, but you can just use bubbles. Just let some air out, and at least that's what they teach us in scuba diving. Oh. When I got my scuba diving license, it's just, exhale some bubbles and then see which way they go. Because you can.
You have a scuba diving license?
I do. I got it in high school, actually.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, long time ago. But yeah, that's exactly what you do. You just let a little air out and then see which way it goes, because you can absolutely get which way's up sometimes if it's dark or whatever. Yeah.
That's cool. Didn't know that. Yeah. Yes, that's right. As always, this episode of The Brain Food Show is brought to you by Wix. What do Wix do? Well, they allow you to create a website for a personal brand, a business, a wedding, whatever else you might think of. We made it for this podcast. You've heard me talk about this before. You can find it at brainfood.fm. You could even make one for your personal brands. I'm seeing that there. I'm like, I got a website. It's not very good. At simonwhistler.com. I should definitely switch that over to Wix, because instantly it would just be much better. just within no time at all. In fact, I'm probably going to do that so I can talk to you about another website I made with Wix in the future. The one I made for BrainFood.fm, it's got a podcast tool built into it. When we first got started, I was like, so you guys could support podcasts? Like if we want to put all of our episodes on this Wix website, that's possible? Yeah, of course it is, Simon. Just click on this box right here and you find the podcast tool. And it's in there with all of these other tools, which I don't use. But wow, they're like super advanced. You can easily set up a store. You could do, if you're a photographer or you just want to share some holiday snaps on your own site, you can do it with their gallery tools. Loads of cool stuff like this. Loads of all of this technologically advanced stuff that you'd think it would take a developer ages to make. It's all easily implemented with Wix. They've got you covered for whatever you want to do. And Wix websites, they also look great on desktop. They look great on mobile automatically. I didn't even know that. Although I do now. When I was building it, I didn't know that the website I was making would also work on mobile instantly and easily. It's just another one of those advanced features that Wix allows you to implement. Go check out our website, BrainFood.fm, see what I made in a really short amount of time, see how good it looks, and all of that good stuff. Also, Wix offers unlimited pages, top-grade hosting for free. You can upgrade to a premium plan if you want to for as little as $5 a month, and that gives you even more. All you need to do is go to wix.com/go/brainfood. Again, wix.com/go/brainfood and get started today. Or we've got a link in the episode description. You can click that if you're feeling lazy. And let's get back to the show. So what are we talking about today? Is it just more of the same? I don't want to say that in a bad way.
Yeah.
That sounds like, more of the same.
Yeah, more of the same fascinating,
more of the same great stuff.
Animal facts. And we are going to start today with the dung beetle. And so you might say, what is interesting about the dung beetle? So beyond the fact that it does make these little, round balls of dung, which is kind of fascinating, then it rolls them, to go, then eventually rolls them away from where it found it. So the other dung beetles don't steal its little ball of poo. And then, it uses it for reproductive purposes and everything. So in any event, so what's interesting...
Look, I could do that.
Yeah.
I could roll my poo into a ball.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could use it for reproductive purposes, though.
Yeah. You could.
That'd be weird.
So what's so fascinating about this and the way they do it? It turns out they roll it in a very specific way, in a very straight line away from where they found it. And so, but what they do first is they do a little happy dance once they've got their little ball of poo. And it used to be thought that this was just like a little excited thing, right? Maybe they're just excited they got some poo. But it turns out this is not what they're doing. They're actually taking their bearings to figure out where to go. And so what exactly are they getting from this? And so it turns out dung beetles have specialized eyes that kind of, basically they can tell like light polarization, direction and stuff. So their eyes aren't very good, but they can see. So like they couldn't see like little pinpricks of light or whatever, like a star, but they can see, like more just like in general, like if the sun, they can do this. And so it was thought, okay, so they're using the sky to navigate, right? So, and it turns out when some studies, yes, like when the sun's up, they are definitely using the sun to navigate, and they're using this little dance to sort of orient themselves, and then they go on their merry way. But what about at night? Because at night they can still navigate, but like I just said, their eyes aren't good enough to see stars in general. So it was naturally assumed, okay, they must be using the moon.
It's got to be the moon,
right?
Yeah.
And so to test this hypothesis, there's researchers led by one Mary Dack, looked to see, are they using the moon? And so they set up this little arena in mini, dung beetle arena in South Africa, and they kind of blocked out views of everything but the sky. So definitely they're only looking at the sky. They're not using any other references. And then they wanted to see how long it took them to cross the arena when they had their little poo balls. So they tested different conditions, one with the moon out, with no moon, and then with an overcast sky, and see how they reacted to this. And so, and they also adorable little cardboard caps for some of them, so some of them couldn't see the sky at all. They put on them. And so this was what they were looking at. And it turns out the dung beetles had a tough time staying in a straight line when there were clouds, and if they were wearing the cap. So definitely they're using something in the sky, whether moon or what. So were they using the moon? And it turns out that no, they were not using the moon. Instead, they must have been using something else. But of course, all that's left is the stars, but they don't have good enough eyesight to see individual stars to navigate. So as Dax said,
We thought they could be using the stars for orientation, but dung beetles have such small eyes that they don't have the resolution or sensitivity to see individual stars.
So they decided then to do a new experiment. So let's look. And so they took the little arena to a planetarium where they can control the stars and see what would happen.
Truman Show.
Yeah. So they put them in there. And so they showed the beetles the brightest stars. So showed that on the planetarium. And then they showed also just the general Milky Way, the whole Milky Way. So that's up. And then they just showed the entire sky, not just the Milky Way part of it, but just the entire sky and see what the results were. It turns out when they're looking at just the brightest stars visible, they were able to cross the arena, but very slowly, and not quite as like a straight line like normal. And when it showed the whole Milky Way, then they crossed at a normal speed, like nothing, perfect straight line, like they always do. And when they show the whole sky, also nice, perfect, just like they do. So it turns out all they're needing is the Milky Way, and that is exactly how they're navigating, is just by looking up and then orienting themselves to the Milky Way itself. And then there was further experiments were done and also confirmed that a different type of dung beetle also did the same thing. They just needed the Milky Way to navigate, and that's what they were using. And that makes them the first known insects to use the stars to navigate outside of our sun, which we'll get into momentarily. It turns out a few different creatures use the sun to navigate, which we're going to get into the honeybee thing shortly. But that's just, I don't know, kind of fascinating. The little dung beetle doing its little happy dance, looking up at the Milky Way and then navigating by it.
Yeah. And the Milky Way is not usually, you rarely see the Milky Way. You really got to be out
they're in
super clear
Africa,
middle of nowhere.
The dung beetle in Africa. So yeah, exactly. Away from city lights and all that. Quite apparent when you are like where I grew up, in the absolute middle of nowhere. You could definitely see it.
I was gonna say, yeah, because you grew up in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, as long as there wasn't a moon. And I mean, that's the amazing thing though, when you do live in the middle of nowhere like that. So at night, you do look up, there's the Milky Way. It's quite apparent. And also though, on a full moon, it is insane how bright it is out. So your eyes just are adjusting more because there's not the, city lights or whatever, all the light sources everywhere. So you can see, you don't need flashlight or nothing. You can just see like all around, almost like daytime, but everything's in black and white type of thing. It's quite interesting. But
going camping next month, I'm rather looking forward to.
Where are you going?
Because I live in the city.
Yeah.
I just don't see stars. You just do not see stars at all.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. Nowhere particular. Just going to the forest.
Nice.
Gonna just do, have a campfire.
I imagine in Europe it would be
do a
harder
little walk in.
to get away from like all major sources of light or like very far away.
When I was growing up, yeah, it was. Was this week's episode or last episode? We were talking about populations, Australia and stuff.
No, actually, that was before we even started recording.
Okay. David and I were privately talking then about how we were surprised Australia only has 25 million people because it's really big.
It was because the time we record is the only English-speaking country that's really awake is Australia. Right. And we were like, for the live stream, it's like, that's going to be great. We're going to get those sweet, sweet Australian views. And then we were looking, it's only like 24 million people total. So, yeah.
Damn it. Where was I going with that? Oh, yeah. So population density and stuff and getting away from light sources. And when we were talking about Australia before we started talking, I was talking about my friend who lives in Montana and he's like, there's no one there. He lives in Prague as well. And my thing about Czech Republic is, I guess, about half the size of Britain, and it only has 10 million people, whereas the UK has 70 million. So it's a lot more population dense. And I quite like it. You can, go out into the forest and stuff, and there's just endless forest. There's loads of forest. Yeah. There's loads of fields. It's nice and empty. And my friend from Montana was like, what are you talking about? This is incredibly densely populated. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, no, it's not. Yeah. So I really like it here. It's, it's nice that there's so much nature and stuff. But
I once drove near where I used to live one time. It was at night, granted, but we drove, I want to say 2 hours straight without encountering another car on the highway, going either way. Because it was a
How is that highway economically viable?
In the daytime you will like every 5 or 10 minutes encounter another car or whatever, but in the starting to get into the evening, there's nothing. Just driving along.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I know. Even though America's 300 some million people?
Yeah, but it's big. So
it's real big.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
we're going to move on to the thing we teased last week, honeybees. So how do their little mathematical abilities that are quite remarkable. It turns out honeybees use a sort of dance to communicate, and humans have translated this dance so we know what they're saying. It's not really that complicated, what they're saying, but what they're doing in their heads is quite complicated to do this. So they find a new source of food or whatever, and then the honeybee will come back, and it'll do its little dance to communicate this to the other bees, like where exactly is this thing? And it turns out there was a study done with like a mountain in the way to see. So just the first part. So this study, in order for the honeybees to get to the source, what they had to do was fly around the mountain. They couldn't fly up over it, but the angle that they gave was the direct as if you were flying over the mountain. And yet the other honeybees were able to do the math in their head of the curvature of that, plus, and the distance, and do the math to translate that. Okay, so if you went straight to it, if there wasn't a mountain in the way, that's that distance, right? But they can't do that, so they have to go around. So the honeybees that would then go subsequently find it had to do the math in their head for the curvature and then translate that. What would the distance be then to get there? And they could do it just fine. And this is not the most impressive part of this.
Wait, that's pretty crazy.
No, it gets better, way better.
Okay.
So they're doing this little dance. So they find the good source and they come back and so they basically do it by turning in circles is the start. So they'll stand on their little thing and they'll turn in circles and they'll bisect this every now and again with an angle. And this gives them how they're doing this is giving them the angle relative to the sun. This is what they're translating. So they're giving them the angle relative to the sun. So all the other bees are watching. They're like, okay, got it. The sun's there. You just told me the angle. And so this is where it gets even better. The problem is, of course, so when they were flying there and they come back, they're giving them the angle, right? So you think, well, the sun's moving, right? I mean, I'm not really, but the earth is rotating and all this is happening. And it turns out the bee comes back, translates that given the time that's passed. They translate it in their head, and then they give them the angle right now. Like if you were to leave right now, this is the angle you go. But the other thing is this dance can take a long time to communicate effectively. So what happens is then the bees...
They adjust for that and the movements of the sun.
Yeah, the bees that go out then adjust for where the sun is now. They say, okay, this much time has passed. Now the angle is going to be different. And so then they'll do it as their flight to translate to where it would be now versus where it was later. Because some of these dances can take a super long time. So the sun can actually move quite a bit. And they do this...
Madness.
They do this calculating the different angles in their head and going. And of course, they're also communicating the distance as well. And it turns out they're doing this by wiggling their abdomens while they're crossing the circle. So they do these wiggles. More wiggles is more distance. And what measurement they're using, I mean, who knows? But they definitely know because it's very precise, the measurements they go. If it's something far away, they'll do this wiggling. And it turns out if something's pretty close, like within about 80 meters or so, they won't do the wiggles. They'll just give the direction and you'll go this way, you'll find it eventually type of thing. You'll encounter it. But if it's really far away, then they'll give the exact distance to it, to this food source, which is quite fascinating. So they're doing this complicated little geometry and trigonometry in their head and also very good timekeeping ability to be able to tell how the angle is going to change as time goes on. And I don't know, could you do that in your head? I don't think I could do that in my head. Really?
Dude, I can barely keep up with what you're saying.
Yeah. I actually do. What's funny is I actually originally did specific examples from this one research paper that shows exactly. So they're, where they bisect the circle means this and this. And I was like, well, that's just too complicated on a podcast form. You need visuals for it. So I cut that out and just went with the high level view of it, which is, still, I think...
it's super impressive.
Yeah, how impressive it is still comes across. But yeah, so the bees, they can definitely, do and I mean, they're also having to calculate, because they know the sun's... Oh, I left out the most interesting part. Here's... Get this.
Okay.
Get this. Now say it's nighttime, right? So they finish their little dance, but now it's nighttime. Yeah. The sun's not up, right? They know that. Mm-hmm. They know where the sun is relative to right now. And so that later they can then do that. So that they actually do the angle of where the sun is on the other side of the earth. And so then when they go flying out to do that, the next day or whatever, they'll do that calculation. So they're also some concept of the earth being round is in there, hardwired into their brain, because they'll actually do where the sun would be on the other side of the earth at that time, the exact angle, which is just insane.
So the sun will go all the way around.
the Earth
sun won't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But in our little Earth-centric bee minds, they'll imagine the sun going around the Earth,
and they know what angle it is on. Even though it's dark out, they know where it would be, like where it should be on the other side of the Earth, and so that later they can translate it to then go find the source once the time has passed. They're using this much time has passed. Now the sun will be here, and so they can use it.
So
once
they'll do the catch-up math the next day.
Yeah, once the sun is visible again, they can
craziness.
Yeah, they can use it as their navigation reference point again once it's daytime, which is just crazy. Clearly it's hardwired into their brain somehow. To do all this math and stuff, but amazing.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, but now we're going to move on to an even more incredible, because bees are super interesting. There's a lot more interesting things about them, but ants are even more so. And we're going to start with the, I don't know, this one's not just like an impressive thing. It's just sort of interesting. So it turns out there are some, like honeybees use their, they use their little combs to store the honey and everything. But certain species of ants actually instead use the bodies of other ants to do this, and not just, and they're usually larger bodied ones, but it's not just as you think, okay, well, they're storing some food in there, big deal, right? Like all ants can do this. They have like 2 stomachs, and one of them's for the colony and one for that. But these certain types can actually do it. They're called like honeypot ants. And what they do is their body actually swells up. So once it's designated, this is going to be a honeypot ant for food storage. So they're sitting there, and they're usually very central to the little, nest or whatever, just for protection, because there are actually a lot of creatures like the honey badger and stuff know about these things and will dig and try to get them. Because it is just like honey, basically. It's a really sweet tasting nectar, but they'll actually get so much food that their abdomen swells up to about the size of like a grape. And so you just have this tiny little ant with a just massive, it's like morbidly obese, basically.
Have you seen pictures of this? Did you look these up?
Yeah, I have. And
dude, it's crazy. It's more crazy than you think.
Yeah.
Like, I had imagined this in my mind, and I was like, oh, so it's a little bit weird looking. No, it's like a little grape.
It does. And humans also, like Native American tribes and Aborigines and stuff, actually used to use, I don't know, maybe still do, I don't know. They used to just, you harvest these things. You can just like dig them out, and then there's all these ants food stores, and it's like, imagine just like this super sweet nectar, and you just bite off the end, and it's like a grape, just eating it. And as they're swelling up and stuff, they inevitably can't move anymore because they're just so massive. And so these worker ants are constantly bringing them more and more stuff to these honeypot ants, more stuff to store for just, times when food's scarce or whatever. And so they're bringing them to them, they're swelling up, and eventually they can't move, and it doesn't really matter because the paths in and out of the ant nest is they're not big enough, so they're kind of trapped where they are. So they just keep swelling larger and larger, and to retrieve
these things can't. They couldn't move anyway. They're those pictures.
Yeah.
They're not going anywhere.
No, and so
what'd be cool when we live stream, by the way, is I reckon we can throw up images when we're doing these.
Yeah, and
that would be cool.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So
side note,
to retrieve the food. So how do they actually get the food out of it? Turns out the worker ants will come and they stroke the antenna in a certain way, and that will cause the honeypot ants to regurgitate a little bit of the liquid for the other worker ant to either eat themselves, or they can take it and distribute it wherever it's needed to like the queen or whatever. Because again, like the ants have the 2 stomachs, so they have one that they use for themselves and one for storing stuff. So pretty much all ants can do this to some level.
Just give it a little tickle and it throws up.
Come on, give me some of that sweet nectar.
Take that to the queen.
Yeah. So this is what they do. But the honeypot ants are special just because of the size that they can get, just massive, just swelling and swelling. So that's just one of many fascinating facts about ants, and I thought we'd cover many today because there are way more interesting things. So to start with, one of the more boring ones, but kind of interesting. So you have soldier ants. So these are worker ants. They can collect food like any other ant, but they can also attack. They will sometimes attack enemy colonies, and they'll steal some of the eggs from the colonies, right? And then take them back to their own colony. And then once they are all, now they're little ants, and they use them as lifelong slaves. They literally use them for tasks like collecting food, building the anthill, taking care of eggs and all this. And it turns out the Amazon ant, particularly, the hive itself is unable to sustain itself without slave ants. They need the slaves to basically do these tasks that they don't do.
There's definitely a joke there about Amazon and minimum wage. I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah. Oh, and so moving on to something slightly more interesting, suicide bomber ants. These are actually a thing in some type of ant. So basically what happens with these ants is when they encounter enemies, whatever they've determined is something that's a threat to their colony, they will literally explode. And this causes little chemicals to basically cover the enemies around them. And it's very sticky, and then it dries, and it completely immobilizes, other small insects and things. Which will then cause them to die. But it just also, the suicide bomber ant also dies in the process, but perhaps taking out several enemy invaders at the same time.
Wow.
And so also another type.
I didn't see any video. I didn't look this up. I should have looked that up. There must be a video of this, right? Did you look it up?
I did a long time ago. I have not seen a video, but I do remember seeing a video of it. Quite interesting. So then there's another type called the Forelius pusillus ant. And these ants also, they have ants that will sacrifice themselves, but in a very different way than the suicide bomber ants. So they have the nest at night needs sealed off every night to make it, basically the whole point of this, to make it undetectable from the outside. So you can't tell that there's a nest there at all. So the predators will just pass that area by. And so what they do is, it seems like it's the sick and old ants volunteer in some way or are tasked with this somehow. However, they're doing it, deciding who goes out. And so they're just little sacrificial ants. They will go out, they will seal the entrance, and then they will, go on their merry way and die. And researchers have tried to collect these and then see what happens. Will they stay alive if we actually take care of them or whatever? And they usually don't. They usually die.
Take them to like ant hospital.
Yeah. They usually die pretty quickly after, which is where the idea that they must be like just the older ants or sick ants must be chosen for this task, because they don't live very long once this is done. But yeah, they're just sacrificing themselves for the good of the colony. And then another interesting one, speaking of entrances and ants, there's gatekeeper ants. This one type of ant, the cylindricus ant. So it has, some of the ants have these flattened heads, right? So they go and they block the entrance to the nest. They're literally like gatekeepers, like you can't get in or out. And to get...
With their head?
Yeah, with their head. So they're just sitting there with their head. That's all they're doing is blocking. And so if you want to get in, or if you want to get in, you're an ant that's outside and you want to get it back in, you have to basically, they use their antennas to identify themselves. And then if the ant decides, oh yeah, you're a member of our colony, they'll move aside, let the ant in, and then they go back to blocking the entrance once again.
It's like a living door.
Yeah, just kind of cool.
Crazy.
And then we have the Catallacus muticus, sure, worker ants.
Yeah,
these
I'm
ones,
not even going to try.
Yeah, these ones are interesting because if there's excess water, like if there's flooding in their nest, they will all start, ingesting it, and then they walk out and then spit it out, which, that's kind of cool, but not super interesting. But what's really interesting is there's other type of ants that will make rafts instead. Like if flooding starts to happen or it's just like raining, they will make rafts and then float around on these rafts. And this seems to be probably why pretty much every habitable island on the planet has ants, So that's probably how that happened.
Oh.
Because they made little boats, and then they're just floating around, spreading around. But that's what they do in response to flooding and things like this. So kind of interesting. And so this gets us back to similar to the honeybees, like how do ants find their way around? So this is quite interesting. So they use a variety of methods. It depends on the type of ant, obviously, but in general, so you have like the pheromone trails and stuff like that is a big one. But if it's lost or weak, some ants actually have the ability to communicate. So it's very similar to bees, the exact location in really complex ways, similar to the bees. So to begin with, they actually seem to use landmarks, distances, and direction to sort of communicate this. And some type of ants actually seem to have the ability to detect the Earth's magnetic field and use that as a reference in navigation. And also the sun, again, very similar to the bees, they could use the sun. And so they communicate.
I feel like we got shafted on all these cool abilities.
Yeah.
Like I wish I could sense the Earth's magnetic field.
Yeah.
I just rely on Google Maps, and it's not always awesome.
There's some type of bird, I can't remember the type of bird, a robin or something that actually...
It's a robin, with one eye that can sense it.
Yeah, they can actually see the magnetic field of the Earth.
So cool.
Yeah. Kind of cool, but so
I want a robin's eye. Why can't I have a robin's eye?
Yeah, it would be kind of cool. But you have they seem to communicate with gestures, but not just gestures. This is the really cool one. Also, noises produced by their mandibles, so they're literally communicating with noises. They're talking to each other.
They're talking to each other.
Which is kind of scary when you look at all this cool stuff ants can do, and their biomass is basically the same as humans on Earth. When you add them all up. But
as soon as they get giant, I'll stop being afraid of them.
Yeah. So another interesting thing is, so when they're communicating, though, the ants they have to convince the other ants to stop what they're doing and come help me. I found this cool food source. you guys, it's really cool. You should all come check it out. So that's what they do. So, but the other ants, they're busy with their own jobs. And so they have to be really convincing. So it seems that they can also not just tell them, what direction and where to go and use all these landmarks and references and pheromones and everything, but they also seem to be able to communicate exactly how much food is available on the other side. So if it's enough to stop what they're doing, depending on what else is going on, the other ants will, or more of the other ants will then go and, help out. And they seem, in this way, it makes it very efficient for only sending enough ants. So like not all the ants will just suddenly drop what they're doing and going. Like they seem, however their little brains work, to know, okay, that's a great amount of food. And so we'll send this many ants will just be convinced to go, however their brains do it. And then depending on the needs of the colony at the time, and then they'll all go and find the path. And so it turns out ants are super efficient at this, at finding the most efficient path. And that's a really difficult problem in mathematics and computer science. So you think of like Google Maps or something. It turns out you can't get the best solution. Like it's just even like with supercomputers and stuff. If you're talking about like if you want to go, a couple 100 miles away or something, what's the most efficient route to do that? And it turns out that's a really hard problem to solve algorithmically and with the computational power. I won't get into the exact there, but it's really hard. And you can't get...
It's interesting. I never thought about it.
Yeah, and like companies like UPS or like a airline, like this is a big problem. Like because if they can just even get like 1% more efficient at their paths, like this saves a lot of money. So there's a lot of money in finding efficient paths. And so what like Google Maps and stuff does is actually they do kind of a best guess type, like a best estimate type thing in their algorithms. So you can't be, basically the problem is you can't be sure that you have the best one, the best route or whatever. And so if you can just get like a slightly more efficient algorithm, maybe you're going to save like millions of dollars if you're UPS, or even, billions over a big enough span. So this is a big problem. So ants have been studied because they're really good at finding the most efficient path. And this brings us to the Towers of Hanoi math puzzle that you teased earlier. So this is great. This is just one of many studies that have been done looking at. So that one, you move the discs from one rod to the next sort of thing. But of course, the ants can't, that's not really the way they did it with them.
Can't physically move.
Yeah, so they just sort of made a version of this puzzle that ants could do in basically finding the shortest path and to the solution. So the ants, it turns out when this study they were doing had 32,768 possible paths to choose from, but only 2 paths presented the optimal solution in this study, right? So that's a lot. And it turns out with this 32,768 possible paths and only 2 possible, they solved it. The ants solved it in under an hour to find the optimal path to this thing. And then, so once they did find the optimal path, the researchers then blocked the path to see what would the ants do. And at first...
Will they figure out the other one?
Yeah, will they figure out now there's another optimal path, or will they just go around the thing? And at first they did just go around the obstacle and keep going, but by going around the obstacle, it now made it the not optimal path. And within an hour of that, they managed to discover that there was a new optimal path that they should then take. So something in their brains, they didn't just keep going the suboptimal path, in the way they explore and things like this. It eventually, quite quickly, discovered that there was a new route that was a better path. And so that was the one that was established. And this is just one of many studies that look at ants and their way they come up with the optimal paths to things and all that. And it turns out this has actually been used in practical applications, looking at ants, some of their algorithms that have come up with for like vehicle routing, like we were saying, like UPS or these sorts of things. And protein folding problems is another one. There's actual real practical applications to being able to do these things slightly more efficiently. And like one of my computer science professors said, if you can, like even like you're talking like Netflix and Amazon.
If you can get an ant to do it.
Yeah, no. Well, he was just like, if you can literally get, slightly more for, at the time Netflix had like $1 million prize or something. This was in the early days for if you could get like 1% more efficient, you could, with their recommendation engine, because it is one of these type of problems. This is just not easily solved by algorithmically. If you could just get 1% more efficient, they would give you like $1 million. It was like $1 million prize or something like that. But that is like pennies, because an airline would pay you, or UPS would pay you so much more to get like the, if you could make their algorithms for, scheduling flights and optimal use of an airport, and their planes and stuff, just slightly more efficient. This is like hundreds of millions of dollars type of thing. So, but turns out it's kind of hard. So, but there's a lot of research, and ants is one of them that is studied for practical purposes. So another interesting thing about ants, they interactively, they have been observed to interactively teach each other skills as well. So like for one example, the Temnothorax albipennis ants, they have been observed. So the foragers, when you're a new forager, you tag along with an experienced forager, and they've been observed basically showing them the ropes of how to forage and do this stuff. So they're kind of teaching the skills to the new next generation.
This feels, after we just found out that they could solve like logistics problems for large companies, the fact that they can learn. Now I'm kind of like, they can just learn. Yeah. They can't do it with their thoughts.
Yeah. Well, it's
disappointed.
Yeah. The individual ants are quite stupid. It's really the whole nest, that's the colony, that's quite intelligent in their behavior. The individual ones, of course, have these, whatever hardwired in their brain to do different things. But then when you look at the whole colony, they do quite complex tasks. And so speaking of like an individual ant and sort of an interesting thing, this one might be something people have heard of before. I just think it's still quite interesting.
Oh yeah, I knew this one. It is creepy.
It's how, like precise it is. So you have the parasitic fungus. I don't know. You want to give that one a go?
Ophiocordyceps unilateralis.
Yeah, that was good. Good.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I have no idea if it was correct.
That sounded really convincing. So yeah, it's a fungus that just sort of infiltrates the ant's body and, releases some chemicals in the ant. And this will cause it to wander away from the colony, and then not just wander away, but it specifically seeks out a perch that is approximately 25 centimeters from the ground and at a favorable angle to the sun. And once it finds this, it will then lock its mandibles onto the object, like a leaf or a twig or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, of course, it will die, and the fungus will continue to grow, and then from its head, and then send off spores and infect other ants. But this is the cool thing, is apparently the other ants seem to be able to know when there's an infected ant here, and this is going to wipe out the whole colony if they're nearby. Yeah, and that's exactly what they do. They will grab that ant and they will take it away from the colony if it's detected that this weird ant is, has a weird behavior or whatever. And they get.
If you haven't seen the pictures of these ants with this weird thing growing out of their head, it's definitely worth looking at. I think there's even like time-lapsed videos of this happening. It's creepy.
Yeah.
Full level creepy.
So there's lots of other interesting things about ants. Ants are super fascinating, but we've talked enough about ants. We should move on to, speaking of sort of a parasitic thing. So we have, there is a parasite. So if you go, it resides, I think it's actually spread a little bit. I saw something about like near Britain or something. It's now been found with fish. But in any event, in the Gulf of California, around that area is where it can be commonly found. And so this tiny is basically Simotha exuga. What?
Yep.
Sure.
100% correct.
Yeah. Basically, what this thing does. So it gets in a fish's mouth, however it gets in there. And then the female will, so the male will actually attach behind the gills, but the female will latch on the base of the fish's tongue. And then what will happen, it will use its little like suckers or claws or whatever to suck the blood for the tongue. Basically takes the tongue's blood supply away, and it's just making sure the tongue's not getting any blood supply. The tongue will eventually die and just detach from the fish. And then when this happens, the little parasitic thing will then reattach to the tongue stub that's there now. And then it becomes its replacement. And it not just like this, I mean, the fish still needs its tongue for doing stuff. And so now the parasite is the tongue, and it will use, and the fish can just.
Oh, I hate all this stuff.
Oh, you look at the pictures of this. It's so.
I know, I've seen the pictures. It's horrible.
Yeah, it's like they look a little happy. They're like happy little parasites. They look like little smiling things with their little, you can see their eyes and everything. And sometimes there's more than one in there, like the male and the female and all that. Yeah. So, but the fish can use this, like it seems to have no negative effect. The fish just use the parasite as its tongue as normal. And this is good for the parasite because then the fish is going to live longer that way. So it's just using, it's a little replacement tongue that's a parasite. And so just go ahead, everyone, just Google that. I'm
glad we don't have this.
Yeah.
Like there's no parasite out there that causes our tongue to drop off and replace it.
They do,
I like tasting.
They do have that one, the cat one that's in the cat poo sometimes. That actually does seem to affect human behavior. Makes something to do with like rape.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it. I did not put that one in the notes. I thought to put that, but it didn't. I don't know. Didn't seem as.
No. Let's just not scare people so much.
Yeah, cat poo. It's in your brain.
Terrifying.
I do remember there's something if you're pregnant that's like a major bad one to get that parasite, and it resides in your brain forever. It's not going anywhere. So once you got it, and it does seem to affect behavior mildly. So, I think it's something to do with the temper or something. I don't remember. Either way.
There was like, it would, I remember it. We got to follow up on this.
Yeah. Either way. So moving on through other fish. So This one's just funny. So there's school swimming.
I'm glad we have something a bit lighter. This is the last one, right?
Yeah,
I'm glad we're finishing on this.
So the school swimming herring.
Rather than the tongue parasites and the parasite that grows out of the ant's head.
The picture is really, I mean, if you're just talking about it, it's like, yeah, that's a little horrifying. But if you just go look at the picture, it's like, oh, no, that's not right. So school swimming herring, apparently, it would seem they use their farts to communicate. And this is the really funny part. So the scientists who discovered this.
I use my fart to communicate.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to be left alone.
Yeah. The scientists.
This part of the bus is just for me.
Because of how rapid these little ticking fart sounds are in these fish, they called them officially fast repetitive tick sounds, which if you do the acronym for that is FERTs.
Oh, no.
This is literally what the scientists called it. As it said in the...
This sounds like something your government would come up with.
Yeah. Just some researchers. It's bursts of about 7 to 65 pulses, lasting around a half second to about 8 seconds is what these pulses do. And so these high-frequency FERTs are emitted there. They are very high frequency, which is critical to a point we'll get to momentarily. But it was, okay, so they're doing this. Why are they doing this? Oh, and it should be noted, they get this by filling their swim bladders and then doing that rather than, digestive food type thing. That's where they're getting the air from. But so it's like, what are they doing this for? What are they saying? They seem to be communicating, but what are they saying when they do this? So the researchers were looking at stuff. So they introduced like little disturbances and potential predators like shark odor and stuff like that. This didn't have any effect. Nothing. It didn't seem to affect the FERTs. So it didn't seem like they were alarm calls of anything. It didn't seem to be involved in mating in any way. It didn't affect that. So it wasn't that. But it turns out these herring, even in the dark, can do these like very coordinated, the way they like a shoal in a grid pattern and stuff. And like equidistant from each other. And so they seem to be able to know how to do this even in the dark. So they can't see each other. And so that seems to be what they're doing, is communicating sort of position and stuff like that. And so this is why the high frequency thing comes into play, is because they do it at very high frequencies. And this is outside of above around 2 kilohertz. And this is outside of the auditory range of a lot of predator fish. And so it seems like they're communicating position and stuff like that, like in the dark and things like this, by these FERTs, as the researchers called it, FRTs. And so...
the stuff scientists get up to.
Yeah, this like, Ben Wilson, Lawrence.
What's your research area? Fish farting.
And not just one. It was, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 researchers. Ben Wilson, Lawrence Still, Robert Batty, Magnus Wahlberg, and Håkan Westberg. They were honored for this for an Ig Nobel Prize in biology in 2004 for, of course, the achievement in science that makes people first laugh, but then actually think. So, yeah, one of the many. My favorite is the one with the stripper ovulating, where the researchers determined that strippers earn more when they're ovulating in tips than when they're not. And it's not actually clear why. Like, is it some sort of is there actually like some sort of like a thing that the males are picking up on? Or is it just that the woman, when she's ovulating, is maybe more into her job or something as a stripper? It's not clear why they're actually getting like one of those things, or maybe both, but it's definitely, they earn, I don't remember now off the top of my head what the percentage was, but it's a marked difference in tips, increase in tips when they're ovulating versus when they're not. Oh, and the fascinating thing too was when they, if they're on the birth control pill, which a version that would stop them from ovulating, they don't earn more in tips.
Oh no.
So yeah. It's fascinating.
Yes.
And the research...
Lessons for strippers.
Yeah, but just the fact that this was like a research project by...
Project.
Yeah.
Paid at a university somewhere.
Yeah. Let's go.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Was that it? Is that
yeah,
our last fact today?
Yep.
I don't have any feedback. People who were listening last week know that we recorded, or last episode, know that we recorded this episode and the last episode back to back. So I still don't know why horses sleep standing up, but at some point in the future, if they sleep standing up, at some point in the future, we're going to answer that. Well, highly anticipated question.
Yeah.
I also did the reviews last time that we got. Yeah. I don't. Oh, I also realized that the last time we did a review, it was actually from June the 2nd, because I sorted them in the wrong order. I sorted them from most helpful. Rather than most recent. So I could do one. You ready?
Sure.
Always interesting and often fascinating. Kate Cat 1138 says, I started with the Today I Found Out YouTube channel, always well researched and well presented. I love listening to Simon and Davin. And like I said in the title, they are always investing. I guess she means interesting. Although, I don't know. Are you investing?
Well, yes, this podcast is quite expensive, so we're investing quite a bit. And time often, more than anything.
Yeah, the time investment is pretty significant.
Yeah.
And often fascinating. Keep up the great work. Dr. Freedom says, great show. Found it from you on Today I Found Out. Top 10s and biographics. Those are the YouTube channels. Today I Found Out. Go check out those other ones as well. How's that?
Good.
Should we wrap it up?
Sounds good.
Cool. Nice to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be a genuine break between this one and the next episode.
Yeah.
So that'll be nice. We can find out about the horse problem.
Yeah.
Or solution, or it's not either of these things. We'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Good to talk to you. See you soon. Bleh, take that to the queen.